much, Joe. And now for our next presenter is actually going to be Peter Houlihan, who specializes in planning and leading expeditions to threatened rainforests all over the world, and going to talk about what it's like for conservation, rainforest conservation in the 21st century. And of course, I think going to give us a little insight into the $10 million Rainforest XPRIZE and what that means, and give us a little more insight into everything that he's working on.
Thanks, Wes. Love your tree house there in the background.
Just one or two plants, you know, missing the jungle myself.
You got to make it happen. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen.
Great.
And
so a little bit of polar bears, slightly lights.
Oh, we got a visitor.
We do got a visitor. So we're going to, there we go.
How's this?
That looks great. We can see you.
Cool. All right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. It's kind of neat to be able to share a little bit of the work that I do with all of you while we're all quarantined and some of the biodiversity around the world. But like Joe said, it's also a good time to explore our own backyards. And that's how I'm going to start. That's how I started my career growing up in Maryland, just exploring my own backyard, and now finding myself back in Florida where I haven't lived for years, getting out in the outdoors every evening at sunset and walking on the same trail, the only one that I've been allowed to walk on for the past 11 weeks, but just getting in a routine of getting outdoors and seeing the wildlife that I'm so fortunate to have nearby in my backyard. And in this amount of time, I've realized from the couple hours that I walk each day, I've probably on this one trail walked the entire length of the state of Florida. And in the process, seen some incredible animal behaviors, a lot of biodiversity. And these are all shots just from the past few weeks during the pandemic. And so it is something that continues to inspire me and also keep my sanity, being able to get out into nature and have such beautiful access to nature. And so I hope that wherever you are, maybe not in a tropical place like Florida, you're still able to get out on somewhat of a regular basis and see some wildlife. So on that note, with these last few shots, this was just last night, some raging storms here in Florida. I'm going to rewind a little bit to a different time when we were all more social. This was actually my last expedition working with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, who are extremely social, and documenting their behavior. And it's just an incredible experience. And oftentimes now I look back to these experiences that I've had throughout the years on various expeditions, and I'm going to share some of those with you today, and also explain how, in the end, you can get involved. And so this was my last team, ironically wearing masks before we knew about the global pandemic that was brewing outside, wearing face masks here, because we were working with close relatives, chimpanzees, and we can very quickly spread diseases to one another. So all of that said, today I'm going to share, in the limited time that we have, a little bit of my work in tropical rainforests around the world and efforts to document the biodiversity within them, to protect them ultimately for our own sake. This is our natural habitat, our only planet that we call home. And these forests are home to the majority of, the overwhelming majority of terrestrial life on Earth. And so they're just spectacular, majestic forests that people have probably seen many images of throughout the years. And my focus throughout my career has been to understand the species that live within these forests and their relationships to one another, their relationships to the environment, and how our own species fit into that equation. And so I'm going to share some behind the scenes photos. I always start with this one because I think this is what a lot of people think us tropical biologists do working in the tropics, but it often looks very different from that in many different ways. And so just the quick behind the scenes of these different expeditions, they take many different forms, many different teams. And ultimately, in the end, I'm going to introduce a little bit about the Rainforest XPRIZE, an opportunity for you to register a team if you have um, the skills and colleagues and connections to actually make a difference in the world of rainforest conservation. This was a field course I was leading for Johns Hopkins just a couple months ago in the Congo Basin. And like I said, these ecosystems are just home to impressive amounts of biodiversity, only rivaled underwater by coral reefs. And my passion for rainforests really came from my passion for insects. And that was due to the sheer biodiversity, the numbers that you find in the animal kingdom that are represented by insects. And certainly phenomena like the monarch migration and those aspects of the natural world interested me. But like many people, also these mega charismatic species, the elephants and lions and cheetahs, and other great migrations. So throughout my career, I've been really fortunate to work in many of these different environments, leading teams of local scientists to document the biodiversity of places like Madagascar, for example, where you have lemurs and really bizarre group of mammals called tenrecs, of course, chameleons, and what really has driven me are questions as well. Places like Madagascar, an island where you have boas, where boas are found in the Americas, and but the island of Madagascar, through its geological history, has boas rather than pythons, which you find on the mainland continent of Africa and throughout Asia. And so it was really at an early age for me, the wildlife that you find in tropical rainforests that instilled in me care and concern to protect them. Species like the bee hummingbird, the smallest bird in the world found in Cuba, these just amazing evolutionary adaptations in camouflage throughout many reptiles and amphibians. And over the past almost decade, I've been working on flowers, including many different orchids. So the species list has spanned quite a bit, but ultimately it has been for the objective of protecting these environments. And I really got my start on the island of Borneo, the third largest island in the world, known for certainly for its biodiversity, including orangutans and other primates, Bornean pygmy elephants, a lot of different endemic species. And then really remarkable species like flying frogs and flying lizards that all have adapted ways to glide through the forest. But for me, getting into this field with a pure sense of passion about wildlife, this image here of Borneo was not what the island was when I first arrived. And so many of these images that we see now of rainforest degradation around the world are a very prevalent reality. And it really inspired me to shift my focus in my career a little bit differently to focus on protecting these ecosystems as a whole. And this is some mining in the Amazon last year. But all of these aspects of how our species has misused our planet, including wildlife trafficking, wildlife markets, these things are all connected even to our current pandemic now. And so these are driving forces that really inspired me to find ways that we can better work in harmony with our environment, both for ourselves, but all the species within these rainforests, to better protect animals coming back home, to species, endangered species like the Florida panther you see here. And so ultimately, I'm going to show just a few images about the expeditions into these environments and the logistics and the behind the scenes work that I have come to take on over the years, just to give you an idea of what this actually looks like and what is entailed. And oftentimes it's just managing problems. Very few things go according to plan. And ultimately, the goal is to, by whatever means possible, just get to the field so that all the scientists that are partaking can conduct their research that's essential to understand what exists and what lives in these environments, how local communities depend on these natural areas, and how they can be protected into the future. And this, some of these are from recent expeditions in Borneo and the Congo Basin, the Amazon. And just like I said, very few things go according to plan. In this scenario, the rivers had gone down in level so much that our boats couldn't navigate them. And so we floated our camp downriver, which of course resulted in everything getting wet, including all of our food and our rice and clothing. And so it definitely is a matter of just making things work and getting the data that is necessary to protect these environments. So a few different camp scenarios in Borneo. This day, our team rushed back to get in some fishing to supplement our diet of basically just rice. And throughout all of these really intense expeditions, it's really nice to spend time really closely with good friends in just beautiful environments. And every so often, you get to just relax in the evening and appreciate where you are. So these teams that I have come to coordinate are mostly local scientists who are experts in what they do, working to protect their own backyards. And throughout this process, we've established protected areas. People are working on describing new species to science. And it's something that is just inspiring to see progress when so often in the news we see the opposite. And throughout this whole process, I became really passionate about sharing the work of these scientists, reaching broader audiences. And through photography, I felt that if I could document some of these places and the scientists and the biodiversity in the air or underground or in the swamps, we could inspire more people to to care about protecting these environments. And so a lot of this for me has taken many different forms through many different layers of tropical forests, including climbing trees, installing different tech in the forest, and also working with other photographers to really increase the quality of the visual media that we're using to showcase these environments. And this is something that you can tune in if you haven't seen Chasing Ghosts. It's a fun short film about our quest to document what pollinates the ghost orchid. And all of these different media projects have just really raised awareness for threatened environments and threatened species around the world, and ultimately changed my perspective in many different ways of how we view these forests and how we view the challenges within them and how we need to approach them in a diverse way to come up with solutions. And so there's nothing like when I first started climbing trees, the thing that I really loved the most is feeling like I had a decent understanding of a rainforest from the ground up, but totally changing your world when you look at everything that you've ever known from the top down. And certainly we are nothing compared to our closest living relatives in the treetops. So all of that is to say, this background in a very quick, rapid way has also inspired me to do a lot of different training with the scientists that I work with, instructing tree climbing, leading field courses, training local scientists so that they are equipped with the skills and expertise needed to document these forests and to implement necessary protections. And in this process, we now are more and more deploying all sorts of different technology to document what's in tropical rainforests. And that's going to segue me into the Rainforest XPRIZE. And just with a couple minutes left, I'm going to share a video about this, and you can Google the Rainforest XPRIZE about innovating technology, coming up with really diverse teams to come together with solutions to rapidly and remotely document biodiversity in tropical rainforests so that we can understand all of the layers and more efficiently come up with strategies to protect them. So with that, I'm just going to share a quick 2-minute video about the Rainforest XPRIZE. And like I said, you can look up the Rainforest XPRIZE. Team registration for this goes until March. And we will actually be hosting an informational webinar in about a month, just after World Rainforest Day. So go to the site, register a team, join a team, and tune in for our informational webinar that will address any questions that you may have. And with that, I'm going to share a different screen. Wes, is this now on the right page? Oh, stop. I'm gonna, there we go.
Yeah, it looked like we were good to go. We saw the video.
There we go. All right.
The rainforest, an area home to more species than anywhere else on Earth.
I feel like I'm in the heart of everything. There's a thriving that is really powerful.
An area that cleans our air, purifies our water, and holds many of the important solutions to tomorrow's problems.
This rainforest is instrumental to the survival of the entire human race.
We need to protect what we have. The future of humanity is at stake.
How can we monitor a large area of forests that would provide us with a view of the tropical forest functioning?
We need nature.
All right.
Well, that was a very inspirational video with a lot of great sound bites telling us why the rainforests are so important, which actually we've got a couple questions that have come in that I want to share with you, Peter, so we can talk about it. We've got actually one from all the way in Brazil. So it's someone who is who works on a team of researchers and students in the Brazilian Atlantic subtropical rainforest. Could they take part in the XPRIZE?
Absolutely. Yes, Brazil is a big focus for many different reasons, and anybody can register a team. If you go to the XPRIZE website, look at the rainforest page, and at the very top, you'll see register now, but you also see tabs for the guidelines and all the different information that you need to read to know at this stage how you can be a part of this whole thing. And in 1 month, we'll be having an informational webinar that will really dive into all the questions and answers that are necessary to make it happen.
And so I guess xprize.org is the place to find out more of that information and follow up.
That's the one, xprize.org. I'll be sharing updates on my own, like Instagram, xprize will be as well. So, yeah.
And if they wanted to follow on your Instagram, where do they do that at? Because you've also got great photos and great insights into the work that you're doing. If people are still curious, where do they follow you at? What's the handle?
Just my name with an underscore in between first and last. So it's Peter_Houlihan.
Well, that'll be good. That way they can get more information. And so we've also got another question. I know that you talked about kind of gave us a little peek behind the scenes of what it's like to get ready to go out, a little one, to go out and do research in the rainforests. Yep. They're not, so the question asks, from what this person has heard and read, that rainforest expedition and exploration is not always a comfortable experience. How do you prepare for these challenging trips?
That's a great way to phrase that question. I think it's a mental thing in many respects, because the environments are not the most comfortable, and so over time you come to just, I don't know if it's that you stop caring, but you get used to the insects, you get used to the heat and the humidity.
Acclimate.
You acclimate, yeah, definitely. But it's always interesting being with new teammates and stuff like that, because it's always a shock.
Speaking of new teammates, we've got one joining us.
Yeah, it'd be time to
we're just learning that when it's your account, it doesn't put you in a waiting room.
Oh, well, it's good to see you, Joe.
I'm going to get quiet for a minute and let you finish.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just say that over time you get acclimated for sure. At this point, actually, the last 11 weeks being in quarantine is probably the longest I've spent outside of a rainforest for many years. And so it's more interesting acclimating to this scenario of the world than it is just living. That's kind of my comfort zone by now, but yeah, you get used to it.
So to kind of build off that, since this is the longest you've spent kind of away from the jungle, which is where you feel most comfortable,
yes,
what has been the hardest, or what has been most important to help you acclimate to this new environment that you're not used to and is not your favorite or ideal?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been living in the US for several years, and so that was interesting to come to the US, see you in DC for some meetings, and then be stuck in this country. So for me, the main thing is like a consistency of getting out into nature. And so the images I shared at the beginning are all shots that I took in the past 2 months of just, honestly, I've realized everything shut down except for one dirt road behind a gas station next to a highway that goes through a farm. And that's where I took all of those photos. And so for me, it's been inspiring to see in a place that even I wouldn't typically go to, because you're just like, oh, that's unlikely. And meanwhile, it's teeming with biodiversity. So that's been what I look forward to every single day, is just getting out at sunset, going for a walk, and seeing the usual suspects and seeing things that you don't expect. Seeing, like the other day, I saw a great blue heron eat a baby alligator, which was wild.
Wow.
So things that, over time you see because you're spending so much time out in their environment.
So much like the rainforest, it's about kind of getting to know your surroundings, getting comfortable with it, and acclimating and doing the things that make it easier for you to do that.
And putting in the time. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that, especially sharing images, sometimes it's hard to convey how much time goes into. It might not be that you're trying to get a certain shot, but if I've spent 2 to 3 hours every night for the past 11 weeks, even hiking 8 to 10 miles a night, you might see one bobcat. But it's not like you're just walking out there and, cats are just prancing around everywhere. So
getting a little more behind the scenes of what it's like to be a photographer or storyteller out in the wild. Because I imagine too, with the ghost orchids that, chasing ghosts, how long did you have to wait, like, to get those perfect images of those amazing orchids? I mean, that had to be.
Well, so that was definitely a huge team effort. Mac and Carlton had both been, the technology improved over the past several years to get fine scale enough to have that precision in trees at night, like remotely. I think I worked on those ghost orchids for 7 years, and Chasing Ghosts is our final season where the three of us all came together.
Got it.
And so, yeah, people can check that out. It's now screening this week in Mountain Film. It was in DC Environmental Film Festival, and it's also on the Nat Geo YouTube channel. So,
and those are all free to access, correct? I know Mountain Film switched it up to virtual, right?
It's virtual. You have to pay for a pass. If you are able to, it's worth it. I shouldn't say this, but it's in the Nat Geo Short Film Showcase on the Nat Geo YouTube. It's free there. So that's an easy way to watch it. It's also free in the DC Environmental Film Festival. So,
well, nice. I mean, I feel like I mean, 7 years is a really long time to invest in a project. So I know it feels good to know that people are able to see it and connect with it. And that's a good lesson to also think about too, is that, you know, not everything comes right away when you're doing this type of work. And it does take the consistency to go back and keep, you know, working on it and exploring different, you know, ways to tackle the solution. So a 7-year project is definitely a long time, but it's not been full-time focused. As you were talking about, you've bounced around to everywhere else.
Yeah, so there are a lot of simultaneous projects. I was up until this quarantine, I was spending 12 months a year abroad besides meetings in the US. At that time, I was based at the Florida Museum of Natural History in Florida. Yeah. So that was actually, I started it in a way because it was similar to a project I was working on in Madagascar, but I could drive to my field site, you know? So even though the Everglades is one of the most demanding environments on the face of the planet, and in terms of how comfortable is it, it's one of in the summertime when those flowers are blooming, it is extremely uncomfortable.
I was going to ask because I know Carlton as well, and I've seen some of the photos. What is it like to be in the Everglades midsummer trying to capture these photos?
You have to be extremely passionate. I mean, and you'll see in that video provides a good behind the scenes. But a lot of mosquitoes. Yeah, that's something that you either get acclimated or just realize that's not an environment for you. But at the same time, I view people in other environments, like in cold polar climates. And to me, I'm like, nope.
See, that's where I feel a little more comfortable. Having been both in the jungle and some colder places, I'm quite happy bundled up in the Arctic versus sweating, let's say, in the Peruvian Amazon, which I was lucky enough to get to go to. But I think I'm good. I think that might be
to reach their own.
I mean, DC summers are enough, which not far off from Florida summers.
Not far off. DC was a swamp.
It was a swamp, and I definitely can attest to that, considering the mosquitoes are already here. And it's mid-end of May. So, and it's really interesting to think about the Everglades that way too, that they are so close. So that's, you know, one thing I think everyone today has been kind of talking back about is exploring right outside your door and taking that time to, you know, not overlook that there is biodiversity and wildlife right outside your door. So I know that you talked about how there was the one trail. Are there any other tips for, let's say, photographing or even just finding, you know, being observant in the space near you, whether you're in an apartment like I am in a city or a more rural place or the jungle?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes back to patience. And just oftentimes you might see more just by sitting in one location. And so realizing that in time, putting in the effort, you'll be rewarded in time. One thing I do want to say though, on a local level, is that of all the international work I do, that's to empower local teams and local scientists. But the biggest impact that I ever have is on a local scale, like here in Florida. And so everybody watching can make a difference, can influence their local environmental policy, can vote, can do all sorts of things in your own backyard to protect your own natural habitat around you.
Well, and that's a great way to end it and talk about what we can do locally and stay focused on that and engage. And it's been really wonderful to hear from you, Peter, and talk about the XPRIZE and to hear more about your photography. So again, if you want to follow Peter _Houlihan at Instagram, you can learn more, and xprize.org. And we are going to say thank you to Peter.